Hello and welcome to this video, which is going to be my build video for the Arcanist in the Endless Archive. And unlike my previous video, which was the Oaken Sorcery, this video is a build specifically designed for the average player to go in, clear Arc 4, get their achievement, get their title, and pretty much move on. This build is not meant to go for the highest score possible, and it's not a build that is sort of universal for anything else. This build is specifically focused on the Endless Archive in solo gameplay, though a lot of the aspects in this build can also be converted to a duo build if that's what you like to play. So let's get into the build, and let's start with talking about sets. So first off, we're using a boss setup and a trash setup with a small difference between them. I'm going to explain that difference. If you're on console, I still think it's worth to do the swap between these two builds, even though it's a lot more complicated without add-ons. So let's get into, at first, the boss build. So we will usually have 2 rounds of trash, then 1 boss fight every cycle, and then there's 5 cycles per arc. So in total, we will need to complete somewhere around 20 rounds in total, or 20 cycles in total, sorry. So for the bosses, which is every third round, you would want to use Ravaging. Ravaging, of course, what does this set do? It gives us an enormous amount of weapon and spell damage when we try and debuff the enemy's armor, stacking up and then extending the duration. This is an amazing set, one of the best sets in the game in terms of damage while wearing heavy armor. And of course, we're using reinforced pieces to get as much spell and physical resistance as possible, also called armor. So Ravaging on our big pieces, then a Ravaging belt and a Deadly bracer. So Deadly is the second set that we're using. What does Deadly do? It increases the damage of our overtime enchant effect, which is a lot of our effects, including our beam, which is sort of the main damage of the Arcanist. And then we have a Slangro, which is just the best one piece you can get from a monster helmet. And we're using, as you can see, 2 medium, 5 heavy. So we're going for a lot of physical and spell resistance. And if we go in here, you can see that we're sitting on 18k now, but once we are buffed up, then you'll see we're sitting at 29.5k, and that is an enormous amount of armor to have on a sort of solo DD class build. So what else are we using? Of course, Ring of the Pale Order. We don't have crit surge, we don't have sort of other healing abilities, so we need to have healing from our damage, and this is how we get it. We also 2-bar build, so we're not using the no console ring. So Ring of the Pale Order, the best choice we can do. And then of course Deadly on the daggers. Very important that you get this charge trait. Nernhund on the other hand, you can change this for sharpened if you feel like it. I don't recommend that. Nernhund is more damage. Flame and Poison enchant in the front bar. Back bar, of course, Maelstrom, Perfected Inferno Staff, infused with the weapon damage enchantment. You don't need to go and farm the perfected version of this stuff, because we will already be very, very close to 100% penetration with this build. So that is the gear for process. And what changes for the trash? Well, a Swordblight. We're basically swapping Deadly for a Swordblight. The exact same sort of enchantments and so on, but instead we're going for a Swordblight. What is special about a Swordblight? Well, a Swordblight is an amazing trash set because it makes these huge disease explosions that basically kills everything. The only problem a Swordblight has is that, first of all, it needs a stack of ads, so it's not that good on solo bosses. Second is it also needs the trash to stay alive for long enough to proc, which means that in the first 1-2 arcs, it's better to just use Deadly everywhere, and then once we get to arc 3, we put on a Swordblight on trash, and then we get these explosions and we get clear much faster and much more efficiently. So that's sort of the change. In terms of sort of enchantments, one thing I forgot to mention, of course, why a reduced cost stamina enchant on our Pale Order ring? Well, the beam ticks every 0.3 seconds, which means that you'll get 3 procs of this enchantment per beam, and it just having this one sustain cliff basically makes our stamina sustain infinite. Our stamina bar is not going to move whatsoever. And I think that's a worthy trade-off to make, that we're never really going to run out of stamina by just having this one reduced cost stamina ring. So that's why we're using that. The other ones, of course, weapon and spell damage. And that's pretty much everything there is to say about the gear. These are the two setups we're using. I'm just quickly going to mention that, of course, if you feel like it for the first two arcs, you can go with something like Ansel, so that you're going for a medium set instead. You're also getting the minus layer then, and this will make it a lot easier to clear the first two arcs. So if you're a type of player who just want to go in farm arc 1 for arc 2, this is a much more efficient setup. The heavy setup is mostly meant for once you get to arc 3 and 4 to survive. So if you want to make the choice, you can make the choice to go for the medium setup. And just to show the setups in the preview, you can see them here. We're using our takeaway broth as the food. I'm going to go into the CPs later, but I'm just going to show it here for the people who want to have a picture of what is going on in the build. So moving on to our skill choices. There is a lot of skill choices here. So first off, we're using the beam, sort of eye beam, as our ultimate. This of course does a lot of damage in a very small area and kills everything within. What is also very nice about the beam is that there is a passive in here that you get penetration for every ability slotted. So you can see on our front bar we're getting 3000 penetration from just having this eye beam slotted. So it's a very nice ultimate to have slotted on the front bar. What else do we have? Camouflage Hunter. Of course, we're using this for the critical major savagery, and it also gives us a little. It can give us some minor berserk for a few seconds if we attack an enemy flank. We're unlikely to do that, but there is chances to do that. For example, there is a verse in there that procs an eye that taunts, and then we can go behind and attack from behind. So it's definitely a good slotted build for the major savagery. Lingering Flare. Why is this slotted? Well, Lingering Flare gives us major protection. That is 10% less damage taken. That's very important. We are trying to go for as much damage mitigation as possible. 10%, that's an enormous amount. Then we have Pragmatic Rune Carver. This is also known as the Shield Beam. So this is the morph of the beam that gives us a shield while we're beaming, and this is our sort of main skill as the Arcanist. Then we have Quick Look. What does this give us? Well, it gives us major evasion that reduces our damage taken from area of effect. It procs our enchants on our daggers, and it gives us major expedition, which is very, very nice. There's often AoEs that we need to sort of move out of. Having major expedition is very, very nice inside the Endless Archive. And then we have the flail, which is how we get our crocs. So a typical rotation would look something like flail, then the beam. So that is sort of the typical rotation in there. It also works as a very, very nice damage over time. So this is all for the front bar. Then we have the back bar, and this is where we have a couple of more skills. This is mostly slotted to get major brutality and sorcery, but it also gives us some magic care and stamina back when so there's another morph of this skill. I'm not gonna try and pronounce it, but I prefer this morph because this gives us some magic care and stamina return. Then we have our flames, the wall of elements. Of course, we use this to proc our backbind chant, and it does fire damage. And then we get into some of the more interesting skills. What does this skill do for us? Well, it gives us major resolve, increasing our armor by 5,948. That's very, very nice. That's an enormous amount of damage mitigation. While this armor persists, taking damage applies minor breach, reducing the armor of the attacker by 2,974. Blows against your armor also generate crocs once every 5 seconds. So this gives us an enormous amount of crocs, and it gives minor breach. Well, minor breach reduces the enemy's armor, which means that this procs ravaging. So very, very nice skill. Every time we take damage, then we reduce that enemy's armor and we get an extra stack of ravaging. It's very, very nice. The next skill, of course, it gives us minor resolve. which gives us even more armor. And first time you damage below 50%, the minor protection is consumed to heal you. So this also works sort of as a mini from the brink CP that saves us when we're taking a lot of damage. But mostly we use it for the minor resolve and the minor protection. These two passives are again damage mitigation. We want to take as little damage as possible. And then we have the Razor Caltrops. What does these do? These gives, of course, the enemy's major breach, which is the major debuff to the enemy's armor, which also procs ravaging. So we have two skills that proc ravaging, which means we are guaranteed a very, very high uptime on our ravaging. Then we have the ultimate in the end, which is our oh shit button. And what this does is that it gives us a huge shield that takes a lot of damage you're taking for a little while. And that's basically it. That's just our oh shit button. A Marauder just spawned. We press this. We hope so. This will help us survive the fight. You could slot the I-beam on the back bar as well. I did that for some of the runs, but I like having this oh shit button, especially for the Marauders. And that's everything to do with the shields. So what more is there to talk about? Well, one thing I think is important is, of course, our potion buff. So what powder potions can we use in here? Well, you probably know the classic tri-step potion. This is a very nice potion to use. There's either the crown one, the crafted one, and then there's a potion that is not the most well-known potion, which is the armor potion. And like on the Arcanist, because we have so good sustain because of the I-beam, we can get away with using these. And what do? And they give us 5,000 armor. So you imagine that we proc this, we proc our minor and major buffs, and we're above armor cap. We're literally above armor cap, where every single type of damage that's not oblivion damage is reduced by 50%, even before we start blocking it and before other sort of damage mitigation buffs that we have. And that's what makes these potions so insanely good. They're also good on the Oaken Saucer, but on that build you don't have as good sustain as in this one, or at least stamina sustain as on this one. So amazing potion, and definitely worth using in there as long as you can sustain it. And one of the ways that we sustain it has to do with our CP. So I'm not going to go over the green CP, but our blue CP, we of course have the two damage mitigation CPs that are very, very important. Then we have Thaumaturge and we have Biting Aura. So this just buffs our beam. We are going for two offensive versus CPs on this build. Then onto the red CP. Siphoning spells restores 300 magicka per stage whenever you kill an enemy. That's 1500 magicka on the maximum. 1500 stamina for killing enemies. So we get both 1500 magicka, 1500 stamina. Then we have the max health, and we have the armor. And you can get away without the armor even on this build. So if there's another CP that you like Celerity or any of the other CPs, you can take off the armor because we're actually above armor cap on this build, which is insane to think that you're above armor cap on a DD focused build. So these two are basically our own guarantee, especially on trash, of having infinite sustain together with having this reduced cost stamina cliff. So that was pretty much it for this build. I'm gonna show us killing Thorad, and I hope you enjoyed it. If there's any questions of how do I play this, or what other choices do you make, or is there something you think I missed, feel free to put it down in the comments.